rest of us do, lying to himself to justify a decision he had already made. And besides, we said, warming to our own defense, Bush was president when we began writing this book, and the costly war was dividing the nation. Its consequences are with us today in the continuing warfare and chaos in the Middle East. What other example could have been as powerful or important an opening story? Then, after reveling in our spasm of self-justification in response to the first reviewer, we had to face the dreaded question. Wait a minute, are we right, or are we merely justifying ourselves? What if, horrors, he has a point? As human beings, the two of us are not immune to the pitfalls of thinking that we describe in our own book. No human being can live without biases, and we have ours. But we wrote this book with the goal of understanding them and shining a light on their operation in all corners of people's lives, including our own. In the years since this book first appeared, readers, reviewers, neighbors, and friends have sent us comments, studies, and personal stories. Professionals in fields as different as dentistry, engineering, education, and nutrition urged us to add chapters on their experiences with recalcitrant colleagues who refused to pay attention to the data. Friends in England and Australia formed the Mistakes Were Made Irregulars to let us know who was using this iconic phrase in their countries. We realized that a revision could easily be twice as long as the original without being twice as informative. For the second edition, 2015, we updated the research and offered examples of attempts by organizations to correct mistakes and end harmful practices. For instance, in criminal prosecutions, methods of interrogation, hospital policies, and conflicts of interest in science. Tragically, but not surprisingly for anyone who listens to this audiobook, there have not been nearly enough of those systematic corrections, and in some areas, deeply felt but incorrect beliefs, such as those held by people who oppose vaccinating their children, have become even more entrenched. We made a major change in Chapter 8 by addressing an issue we had intentionally avoided the first time around: the problems that arise for people who cannot justify their mistakes, harmful actions, or bad decisions, and who, as a result, suffer PTSD, guilt, remorse, and sleepless nights for far too long. There we offered research and insights that might help people find a path between mindless self-justification and merciless self-flagellation, a path worth struggling to discover. And then, not long after the second edition appeared, Donald Trump was elected President of the United States, immediately exacerbating the political, ethnic, racial, and demographic tensions that had been growing for decades. Of course, political polarization between left and right, progressive and traditional, urban and rural, has existed throughout history and is still found all over the planet, with each side seeing the world through its preferred lens. But the Trump phenomenon is unique in American history because Trump intentionally violated the rules, norms, protocols, and procedures of government, actions that his supporters applauded, his adversaries condemned, and many of his former opponents came to endorse. Whether or not Trump is in office as you hear this, Americans will long be facing the moral, emotional, and political residue of his presidency. It seems like eons since Republican nominee Bob Dole described Bill Clinton as my opponent, not my enemy. But in fact, he made that civilized remark in 1996. How quaint it now seems in contrast to Donald Trump, who regards his opponents, or people who simply disagree with him, as treasonous, disloyal rats and foes. In our new concluding chapter, therefore, we closely examine the process by which Trump, his administration, and his supporters fostered that view with devastating consequences for our democracy. We wrote this chapter in the hope that once we understand the slow but pernicious shift in thinking from opponent to enemy, we can begin to find.
To keep listening to this audiobook, I've left you a link in the description so you can do it at no cost thanks to Audible's 30-day free trial.